The sheriff's office has now confirmed it. Every member of the Guthrie family is officially cleared. Not one of them did it. Not one of them is hiding it. And yet, the case is far from over, because when the sheriff spoke, it wasn't relief in his words, it was frustration. Investigators aren't chasing a suspect anymore. They're chasing a motive. Was it money? There was a demand. Or was it revenge? Something personal. Something buried deep enough to drive someone to plan this. Motive is what gives a crime its shape. Without it, the truth has no face. 4 investigators studied the evidence separately. 4 analysts reviewed the same timeline. 4 professionals reached the exact same conclusion. The threat came from somewhere else. Which means tonight, while the family sleeps under cleared names, someone out there is still awake. And they know why this really happened from the story the public has been told for 22 days. Paul Cellino, a veteran Chicago homicide investigator with over 35 years of experience, the first and only expert in a homicide investigation hired by CBS News, and 48 hours as an on-air personality. His investigative work directly led to the exoneration of 5 death row inmates. When Illinois Governor George Ryan emptied the state's death row in 2003, he mentioned Cellino by name as one of his reasons for doing so. Chris S.W.C. Kerr, a former assistant last night, a chilling doubt entered the story not from a suspect, but from the top of law enforcement. A former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation went on Fox News and said what few investigators are willing to say out loud. He's not convinced this is a kidnapping at all. Responding to the family's emotional video plea, he suggested the message might not be proof of hope, but proof of desperation. That it could simply be the only move they have left, making it known they'll pay, no matter the cost. But then came the question that stopped viewers cold: is someone really holding her? Is she even alive? Those aren't accusations, they're doubts. And in a case built on uncertainty, doubt can be more dangerous than evidence. Because when seasoned investigators start questioning the very foundation of a crime, it means the story everyone believes may be the one thing that isn't true. Think we have the answers to that question right now. I don't think she's been that her proof of life has been credibly authenticated at this point. So I think you see them searching other places. You see them searching in the backyard there at that so-called manhole. They're still rounding out the investigation, and so I think they're there. They're giving some leeway for some possibility that this is not a kidnapping. And as I said, I'm very skeptical that it is one in the first place. Jennifer Kafender, a retired FBI agent who told News Nation that the ransom notes never made sense from the very beginning, and that they seemed designed to torture the Guthrie family rather than negotiate for money. Well, first to the crime scene aspect of it. They could have found something as simple as a turned-over cup of coffee, or a dropped cup of coffee, or her purse was on the ground, or her phone was strewn in a place that they'd never seen before. But one thing I'd like to key on if I could is that even though the caregivers may be great people, what I always recommend to my clients, and I'm sure Chris does when he does his threat assessments, we always tell our clients to do a background check on everyone that lives in the home or is a close family member of the person you're hearing, because you have to look at that threat vector to determine who's doing what in that home. And the reason I say that is because even if the caregiver is just the most wonderful person, if she has one or more people in her home that are let's say a gangbanger or a criminal, or they're into some type of other behavior, they may just listen to their mom say, "Oh, today we went shopping and she spent $700 and she's so lucky and her kids love her so much." They may know a lot more than people realize. Jim Clement, a retired FBI supervisory special agent and criminal profiler who spent over 2 decades inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation, teach agents one skill above all others: how to read a crime scene the way most people read a headline, quickly, instinctively, and without illusion. And one veteran who spent those decades in the Bureau is now issuing a warning. If this case was never about ransom, then the motive behind Nancy Guthrie's disappearance may be something far darker. These aren't conspiracy theorists. They aren't internet commentators. They're investigators whose entire careers were built on spotting what doesn't belong, the detail out of place, the timeline that doesn't breathe right, the story that sounds true but doesn't feel true. And when they study this case, they don't see a kidnapping. They see something else entirely. Tonight, we put the kidnapping theory on trial and follow the evidence wherever it dares to lead the evidence decide. Let's be fair. Before we hear from the defense, let's present the strongest possible case that Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped, because the evidence is not nothing. On January 31st, 2026,
minutes before sunset, Nancy Guthrie travels by Uber to the home of her oldest daughter, Annie. After dinner and games, son-in-law Tommaso Cioni brings her home. The time is 9:48. 2 minutes pass, and the 84-year-old's garage door closes. After midnight, Monday, February 1st, a masked, armed man approaches Nancy's door. Head down, he focuses in on the home's doorbell camera, then turns back to grab foliage in a clumsy attempt to cover the device.
There's no question that this was planned.
By 1:47 a.m., that Nest Cam is disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., another house camera detects movement. 16 minutes later, 2:28, Nancy's pacemaker.
The sheriff said Nancy could not walk 50 yards by herself, and that evidence indicated she did not leave on her own. Sheriff Nanos said on February 18th, whoever did that knew what they were up to, knew who they were after. Ransom demands followed. Multiple notes to multiple media outlets demanding millions in cryptocurrency. The family responded publicly saying they would pay. We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. She is very valuable to us and we will pay. It was a message filled with urgency, the kind that sounds less like a statement and more like a lifeline thrown into the dark. And the response from the Federal Bureau of Investigation was immediate and massive. 400 personnel deployed. A 24-hour command post activated. The reward doubled to $100,000. That level of federal mobilization doesn't happen quietly. It signals something. An anonymous donor pushed the total past $200,000. Over 55. Zero calls flooded tip lines. FBI Director Kash Patel personally visited Tucson. The President of the United States called the Guthrie family, that is the prosecution's case, a masked intruder, physical evidence of violence, a vulnerable victim who could not leave on her own. Ransom demands a massive federal response, treating this as a kidnapping from day one. Now, let's hear from the defense. In a kidnapping for ransom, the entire operation depends on one thing: proving you have the person. That is how the transaction works. You take someone, you prove you have them, you make your demand, you negotiate. Without proof of life, there is no leverage. Without leverage, there is no deal. This is not an opinion. This is the fundamental mechanics of every kidnapping for ransom in recorded history. It has been 22 days. Not a single piece of verifiable evidence has been delivered to the family, to law enforcement, or to anyone confirming that Nancy Guthrie is alive and in someone's custody. No photograph, no video, no voice recording, no lock of hair, no handwritten note in NY's handwriting, nothing. An expert witness, Paul Cellino, told the New York Post, there should have been something. A video, a photograph, a lock of hair, a drop of blood, something mailed to somebody so they could verify that these people have my mother, he said. In a real kidnapping, especially one this high profile, that proof would have come immediately. Savannah Guthrie acknowledged this herself. On February 4th, she spoke directly to whoever might be holding her mother and said the family needed to know without a doubt that Nancy was alive. She begged them to reach out. That was 18 days ago. The proof has not arrived. Every kidnapping expert who has ever worked a case will tell you the same thing. The first thing a real captor does is prove they hold the asset. That is day one. That is rule one. In many cases, it happens before the ransom demand is even made. In the Nancy Guthrie case, it has never happened at all. Here is how a real ransom demand works. The captor contacts the family directly, privately, through a phone call, a handwritten note, or a message through a channel only the family would have access to. The communication is urgent. The instructions are specific. The last thing a real kidnapper wants is public attention, because public attention brings law enforcement, and law enforcement is the enemy of a ransom operation. Now here is what happened in the Nancy Guthrie case. Days after she disappeared, not hours, days, a ransom note demanding $6 million in Bitcoin was sent to TMZ and at least 2 Tucson television stations. The note was not sent to the Guthrie family. It was not sent through a private channel. It was sent to the media. The Bitcoin wallet address included in the note was publicly viewable on the blockchain. Its confirmed balance when the first deadline arrived, zero. Zero transactions, nothing. A second deadline came on February 9th. Same result. Nothing happened. No consequences, no escalation, no follow-up. Then more notes arrived. TMZ received what they described as a highly sophisticated demand using an alternative cryptocurrency, not Bitcoin, with a conditional mechanism where media coverage itself was part of the payment structure. A separate individual wrote to TMZ demanding 1 Bitcoin for information about the kidnapper, and a California man named Derek Kalla was arrested by the FBI for sending entirely fake ransom texts to Annie Guthrie and her husband. Expert witness Jennifer Coffin. Daffer broke it down on News Nation. She said, "These notes never made sense for someone truly trying to collect a ransom. The timing was wrong. The delivery was wrong. The fact that they went to media instead of the family was wrong." She said it seemed more like someone was trying to torture the Guthrie family than actually negotiate for money. And the FBI confirmed publicly that it was not aware of any ongoing communication between the Guthrie family and suspected kidnappers. 22 days, no communication, no negotiation, no proof of life. Ransom notes that behaved less like demands and more like performances. Designed to look like a kidnapping from the outside, without any of the mechanics that make a kidnapping actually function. Expert witness Chris S.W. Kerr, former FBI assistant director, said authorities were allowing for the possibility that this is not a kidnapping. That is not the language of an investigation that is locked into a kidnapping theory. That is the language of an investigation keeping every door open. To that video last night from the family, right? I think they're playing this out. This is about all they have right now, and they're making it very clear that they will pay. The question really is, and I'm very skeptical of this, really a kidnapping. Does somebody really have her, and is she really alive? And I don't think we have the answers to that question right now. I don't think she's been that her proof of life has been credibly authenticated at this point. So I think you see them searching other places. You see them searching in the backyard there at that so-called manhole. They're still rounding out the investigation, and so I think they're there, they're giving some leeway for some possibility that this is not a kidnapping. And as I said, I'm very skeptical that it is one in the first place. The FBI released the doorbell camera footage on February 10th. It shows a masked figure approaching NY's front door, reaching toward the camera, then walking away. The figure is armed, wearing gloves and a ski mask, carrying a backpack. It is the single most important piece of evidence released to the public, and it is the foundation of the kidnapping narrative. But look at what it actually shows and what it does not. It shows someone approaching the door. It shows them tampering with the camera. It shows them walking away. It does not show Nancy Guthrie being taken from her home. No vehicle was identified leaving the property. No witness saw anyone removing Nancy. No surveillance footage from any neighbor's camera captured Nancy being moved. The cameras that might have captured what happened after the masked figure walked away were disabled. And Google has so far been unable to recover additional footage despite weeks of trying. Sheriff Nanos described the recovery process like 8 layers of paint. You want to peel to the 6th layer, but you might tear it. The footage proves someone was at the house. It does not prove a kidnapping took place. And if the goal was not kidnapping but staging, creating a visual record that screams, an intruder was here, then the footage serves a completely different purpose. It becomes the single piece of evidence that makes the entire kidnapping narrative believable. It is the prop, the set dressing. Sheriff Nanos acknowledged that investigators have not ruled out an accomplice. If there was a second person, it raises the question of whether the figure on camera was the one who acted or simply the one who was meant to be seen. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker that has been unresponsive since 2:28 a.m. on February 1st. She requires daily heart medication that the sheriff said could be fatal to go without. Savannah described her mother's health and heart as fragile and said she lives in constant pain. She has limited mobility. The sheriff said she could not walk 50 yards by herself. It has been 22 days. If she is alive and being held somewhere, whoever has her has managed to keep a medically fragile 84-year-old woman alive for more than 3 weeks without any indication they have obtained her medication, sought medical care, or made any attempt to prove to her family that she is still breathing. In a kidnapping for ransom, the hostage is the product. The hostage is the leverage. Keeping that person alive is not optional. It is the entire point. If the hostage is dead, there is no deal. There is no payday, there is nothing to negotiate with, and yet nobody has proven Nancy Guthrie is alive. Not to her family, not to law enforcement, not to anyone, expert witness. Cellino put it simply, real kidnappers don't wait, they operate under immense pressure. Every hour they hold a victim, the risk of getting caught multiplies. They want payment fast, they make contact fast, they escalate fast. He said, even in cartel kidnappings in South America, there is constant communication, constant proof of life, constant pressure to pay. With Nancy Guthrie, there has been silence, not strategic silence, just nothing. Brian Anton of News Nation did discover that heart medication may be obtainable from Mexican pharmacies without a U.S. prescription, meaning survival is theoretically possible if Nancy was taken south. But Sheriff Nanos has said there is no evidence she was taken to Mexico. And the Sonora Attorney General confirmed his office has received no formal request from the FBI to search for her. A pair of black gloves was recovered about 2 miles from NY's home along Campbell Avenue. Those gloves appear to match the type worn by the masked figure in the footage. DNA testing confirmed the gloves contained genetic material from an unknown male. That profile was submitted to CODIS, the FBI's national database containing over 19 million offender profiles, over 6 million arst, and nearly 1.5 million forensic profiles. No match. Separately, DNA was recovered from inside NY's home that does not belong to her or anyone close to her. That profile also returned no COTUS hits, and critically, the DNA from the glove does not match the DNA from the house. 2 unknown individuals, neither in any law enforcement database anywhere in the country. Sheriff Nanos described the home DNA as a mixture that needs careful separation before genetic genealogy can proceed. He compared the process to peeling paint, delicate work that cannot be rushed. C.C. Moore of Paraben Nanolab said she has full confidence genetic genealogy will eventually identify the contributor, but that process could take weeks, months, or longer. The absence of CODIS match tells us something on its own. Whoever left that DNA has never been arrested, never been convicted, and never had their profile entered into any law enforcement database. That is unusual for a stranger abduction where perpetrators frequently have a history of violence. It is less unusual if the individual involved was specifically selected because they have no criminal record and leave no trace in the system. Exhibit 2 unknown DNA profiles, neither in CODIS, neither matching each other, neither matching the family. If there were 2 unknown people at that house that night, this was not a one-man burglary gone wrong. And if neither has a criminal record, they were not random criminals. They were chosen specifically because they are invisible to law enforcement databases. If the proof of life never arrived, if the ransom notes went to media instead of the family, if the deadlines passed with empty Bitcoin wallets, if the kidnappers never called, never negotiated, never escalated, if the footage shows someone at the house but doesn't show Nancy being taken, and if the medical reality means an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker, almost certainly cannot survive 3 weeks in captivity without medical care, then the question stops being who kidnapped Nancy Guthrie and starts being did anyone kidnap her at all. Cellino suggested the evidence could point to something more complex, possibly involving someone Nancy knew or an incident that did not follow the pattern of a stranger. Abduction. He said the case had the hallmarks of something being staged, designed to look like a kidnapping without actually being one. An inside source told Arizona's family that there was a widespread investigative belief that the disappearance was a burglary gone wrong. Multiple experts who independently reviewed the doorbell footage said it did not look like a planned kidnapping. That source said investigators believed Nancy could still be alive. Expert witness Jim Clement, the retired FBI profiler, warned that if this was not about ransom, the motives behind it may be what he called dark. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Everyone understood what he meant. And then there is the theory that sits beneath all the others and the theory that nobody in the media will say on camera, but that thousands of people are thinking that someone harmed Nancy Guthrie inside that house. That the masked figure on the doorbell camera was not the kidnapper, but the cover story. That the ransom notes were not demands, but distractions designed to pull the investigation, the media, and the entire country in one direction while the truth sits quietly in another. That theory is not proven. It may never be proven, but it aligns with what 4 of the most experienced investigators in this country are saying publicly. The pieces do not fit a kidnapping. It is important to present the other side. Sheriff Nanos, the man running this investigation, they said on February 18th that he believes this was a targeted kidnapping. He said whoever did it knew what they were up to and knew who they were after. He told Reuters he has no reason to believe
I have nothing but hope. You can't do this job without having that kind of hope. We know that there's challenges and the potential is there for a bad outcome, but nobody, 400 cops out there, they all have hope and believe that this is a rescue mission.
So that implies you know that she was alive when she left that house?
I believe that. There's nothing to suggest she wasn't.
Does not necessarily mean Nancy is dead. It could mean the kidnapper is incompetent. It could mean the kidnapper is operating on a timeline the public does not understand. It could mean the FBI is managing communications behind the scenes that have not been disclosed. There are explanations that preserve the kidnapping theory, but those explanations require you to believe that a kidnapper who was organized enough to plan the abduction was too disorganized to send a single photograph proving his hostage is alive. Former FBI agent Grussing identified this as the core contradiction. Very tactical and very well-organized abduction, completely disorganized aftermath. Either the same person planned both, which makes no sense, or the kidnapping narrative is covering for something else entirely. 22 days, 400 investigators, over 55,000 calls to tip lines. So many that the Puma County 911 dispatch manager went on the record begging the public to stop calling with theories and premonitions, and to only report actionable information. Genetic genealogy is processing mixed in, is from inside the house. The FBI is monitoring every cryptocurrency wallet associated with the ransom notes. Cell tower data has been mapped. Search warrants have been executed and the investigation has shifted to what officials are calling gumshoe detective work. Methodical, painstaking, old-fashioned investigation. The kidnapping theory may be right. Sheriff Nanos believes it. The FBI is treating it as one. 400 people are working under that assumption, but 4 of the most. Credentialed investigators in this country looked at the same evidence and reached a different conclusion. No proof of life. No functional ransom. No communication with the family. Ransom notes sent to the press. Empty Bitcoin wallets. A masked figure who proved someone was there but never proved they took anyone. And an 84-year-old woman who has been without her heart medication for 22 days. The evidence will eventually speak. Genetic genealogy does not care about theories. It produces names, And when that name arrives, every question in this case has one impartial witness. DNA, whether this was a kidnapping, a staged crime, a burglary, or something far darker, the evidence will speak. The only question is whether it will speak in time. If you know anything at all, contact the authorities immediately. FBI, 1-800-CALL FBI, 1-800-225-5324, Pima County Sheriff, 520-351-4900. The combined reward now exceeds $200,000. But authorities urge the public, only call if your information is specific and actionable. Theories, speculation, and opinions are overwhelming the system. What investigators need is concrete details, a name, a lead, a piece of truth that can turn the tide. Because in a case this tangled, clarity comes from evidence, and only evidence can bring Nancy Guthrie home. Investigators aren't looking for opinions. They're looking for a location, a vehicle, a detail no one else has reported, something concrete that can break the case wide open. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She is without her medication, whether she was kidnapped or whether something else happened inside that house on February 1st, she deserves to be found. And the people who did this, whatever they did, left behind enough of themselves that they will be caught. If you have information, speak up. The clock is ticking and every detail matters. Subscribe, share this video, stay alert. I'll see you in the next update as we continue to follow the evidence wherever it leads.